Drop the bin! Get on the ground now!
Stop resisting.
Officer, I am standing still. This is my
You
driveway.
are making a serious mistake.
I don't care who you say you are. Hands
My
down,
hands
throw
are
down, or I will
visible.
tase you.
I am not a threat.
This moment will end your...
The shout shattered the peace of a Saturday morning in the suburbs. It was 10:30 a.m. The sun was shining and birds were chirping in the manicured oak trees lining the street. But in the driveway of 412 Sycamore Lane, the atmosphere was thick with the threat of violence. "Officer, you need to lower your voice and listen to me. I am standing on my own property holding a recycling bin. You are making a mistake that you will not be able to undo. I don't care what you're holding. Drop the bin. Get on the ground. Stop resisting. I'm standing perfectly still, officer. My hands are visible. I am not resisting. But I am not getting on the ground in my own driveway because of your poor judgment." The man speaking was Marcus Thorne. He stood 6'2", broad-shouldered, wearing a faded navy blue polo shirt and khaki cargo shorts. He held a blue plastic recycling bin filled with cardboard boxes and empty sparkling water cans. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't running. He was staring down the barrel of a situation that thousands of black men in America face, but Marcus Thorne was different. The officer, a 27-year-old named Kyle Miller with a high and tight haircut and eyes wide with adrenaline, had absolutely no idea who was standing in front of him. Officer Miller had his hand hovering over his holster, the retention strap already unsnapped. His body language screamed escalation. He saw a large black man in a neighborhood where he assumed he didn't belong. He saw a threat. He didn't see the house behind Marcus, the pristine landscaping, or the calm demeanor of a man who had spent 40 years in courtrooms. "Last warning," Miller barked, stepping onto the private driveway. "Prone out now, or I will put you down. Officer, look at the house number. Look at the recycling bin. I live here. I don't believe you. We have reports of burglaries in this area. You fit the description. Now get down." Marcus set the recycling bin down slowly. He didn't drop it. He placed it on the concrete with deliberate precision. He raised his hands to shoulder height, palms open, fingers spread. "Officer, my name is Marcus Thorne. I am reaching for nothing. But you need to know that your body camera is recording a violation of the Fourth Amendment right now. You have no reasonable suspicion to detain me, let alone threaten me with force. Shut up. Turn around. Hands behind your back." Miller closed the distance, pulling his taser now instead of his service weapon, the red dot dancing on Marcus's chest. The air was electric. One wrong move, one twitch, and this Saturday morning chore would turn into a tragedy. Marcus looked at the young officer, really looked at him and saw the panic behind the aggression. He saw a man who was terrified of losing control and in that terror was becoming dangerous. "Before we see how this explosive encounter ends, I need you to do something for me. Scroll down and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from, your city, your state. And if you believe that a man shouldn't have to fear for his life while taking out the trash, hit that subscribe button. This story is about to expose a level of incompetence and arrogance that will make your blood boil. You do not want to miss what happens next. To understand the gravity of Officer Miller's mistake, you have to understand the man he was threatening to tase. Marcus Thorne was not just a homeowner on Sycamore Lane. At 62 years old, his resume was a fortress of legal authority. He had started his career as a public defender in Chicago, fighting in the trenches for indigent clients. He then spent 15 years as a federal prosecutor, putting away organized crime figures and corrupt politicians. But for the last 6 years, Marcus held a title that made him the most dangerous person in the city for a bad cop to cross. He was the executive director of the Office of Police Accountability OPA. He was the civilian overseer. When Internal Affairs finished an investigation, the file went to Marcus Thorne. He was the one who signed off on suspensions. He was the one who recommended terminations. He sat on the very board that decided if an officer kept their badge or lost their pension. That morning, however, he wasn't Director Thorne. He was just Marcus. He had woken up at 7:00 a.m., made a pot of Ethiopian blend coffee, and read the Wall Street Journal on his patio. He had discussed plans for a summer vacation with his wife Eleanor, who was currently inside the house making breakfast. It was a day for yard work. The hedges needed trimming and the recycling truck was coming on Monday morning. He had walked out the side door of his garage, the morning air crisp and pleasant. He dragged the heavy blue bin down the driveway, humming a bit of jazz under his breath. He loved this neighborhood. It was historic, quiet, and full of people who had worked hard to get there. He had lived at 412 Sycamore for 12 years. The mailman knew him. The neighbors knew him. But Officer Kyle Miller didn't know him. Miller was new to this precinct, transferred from a rougher district across town where his aggressive style had been tolerated, even encouraged. Miller saw the world through a windshield and a filter of suspicion. He had been patrolling the area following a dispatch call about a suspicious subject looking into windows 3 blocks away. When Miller turned onto Sycamore Lane, he didn't see a resident. He saw a black man walking from the side of a garage. In Miller's mind, the narrative was already written. This was the burglar. This was the suspect. He slammed on his brakes, threw his patrol car into park, and jumped out before his mind had even processed the scene. There was no analysis. There was no observation of the fact that Marcus was wearing expensive loafers, or that he had a keyring clipped to his belt loop, or that he was literally holding trash. Bias filled in the blanks. Marcus watched the officer approach. He had seen this behavior in hundreds of case files. The pre-textual stop. The assumption of guilt. But usually Marcus saw it on a screen in his office, reviewing footage months after the fact. Now he was living it. He felt the spike of adrenaline, the primal fear that comes when a man with a gun screams at you. But he pushed it down. He let his legal mind take over. He knew that if he ran, he could be shot. If he fought, he would be charged. His only weapon was his knowledge of the law and his absolute, unshakable composure. "You're making a mistake," Marcus said, again his voice dropping an octave, becoming the voice he used to address federal courtrooms. "I am asking you to de-escalate this situation immediately." Officer Miller wasn't listening. He was too far gone in the adrenaline loop. "You don't tell me what to do. You're detained. Do you understand me? Detained." The standoff in the driveway had shifted from a physical threat to a battle of wills, and Officer Miller was woefully unarmed for the intellectual fight he had just picked. "I need to see ID right now," Miller yelled, holstering his taser but keeping his hand aggressively on the grip. "Hand over your identification." Marcus stood his ground, his feet planted shoulder-width apart. He didn't reach for his pockets. He didn't flinch. "Officer, under Terry v. Ohio, you are required to have reasonable, articulable suspicion that I have committed, am committing, or am about to commit a crime to detain me. Asking for ID is a seizure of my person. What specific crime do you suspect me of?" Miller blinked. He wasn't used to suspects citing Supreme Court case law. He was used to people begging, running, or arguing in circles. "I told you. We have reports of burglary in the area. You're in a driveway. You fit the description." "What description?" Marcus shot back, his voice sharp. "Be specific. What was the race, age, and clothing of the suspect?" "A male, suspicious behavior," Miller stammered, falling back on the vague language that bad cops use to cover their tracks. "And you're acting suspicious right now by refusing to identify yourself. Failure to identify is an arrestable offense." "That is incorrect," Marcus said, his tone turning into a lecture. "This state is not a stop and identify state unless I am being lawfully arrested. Being in a driveway is not a crime. Putting out recycling is not a crime. You are operating on a hunch, officer, not reasonable suspicion. And a hunch is not sufficient legal standing to violate my Fourth Amendment rights." Miller's face turned a deep shade of red. He felt his authority slipping away. He couldn't articulate the facts because there were no facts. He had just seen a black man and stopped. But his ego wouldn't let him back down. To back down now would be to admit he was wrong to admit that the suspect knew more than he did. "You're playing lawyer with the wrong cop," Miller sneered, stepping closer, invading Marcus's personal space. I'm conducting an investigation. You are obstructing that investigation. That gives me probable cause. Asserting my rights is not obstruction, Marcus replied calmly, though his heart was hammering against his ribs. I am waiting for you to articulate the suspicion. If you cannot, I am free to go. Am I free to go, officer? No, you are not free to go. Then I am being detained unlawfully, and I want a supervisor on the scene. Call your sergeant, now. I don't need a sergeant to handle a belligerent suspect. Miller spat. Marcus shook his head slowly. I am not belligerent. I am informed. There is a difference, and you are digging a hole that is going to cost the city a fortune. Look at me. Look at my clothes. Look at the car in the garage. Does this look like a burglary to you? Or does it look like a homeowner doing his chores? Miller glanced at the silver BMW in the open garage. He saw the manicured lawn. For a split second, doubt flickered in his eyes. But then Marcus spoke again. You have no probable cause. You have bias. And if you put hands on me, you will be facing a 1983 civil rights violation suit personally. That was the wrong thing to say to a man like Kyle Miller. It challenged his power. It threatened his livelihood. Instead of making him think, it made him angry. He decided right then that he didn't care about the law. He cared about winning. Turn around, Miller said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. I'm done asking. The sound of a screen door slamming drew their attention. From the house next door, Mrs. Gable stepped out onto her porch. She was 74 years old, a retired school principal who had lived on Sycamore Lane for 40 years. She held her smartphone up the camera lens, pointed directly at Officer Miller. Marcus, she called out, her voice, shaky but loud. Marcus, are you all right? I'm fine, Martha, Marcus said, never taking his eyes off the officer. Please keep recording. Do not stop recording. Back inside, lady, Miller shouted, pointing a finger at her. This is police business. Do not interfere. I am on my own property, young man, Mrs. Gable retorted, the steel of a lifelong educator entering her voice. And I am filming you harassing my neighbor. Mr. Thorne has lived here for 12 years. Officer Miller ignored her. The audience was making him desperate. He needed to end this. He needed to control the subject. Last chance, Miller said to Marcus. Show me ID or you're going in. I have told you, Marcus said, his patience wearing thin. My ID is inside the house. If you want proof of residency, I will walk to the front door, unlock it with my key, and step inside. You can witness it. It was a reasonable offer. It was the definitive proof. If Marcus had a key to the front door, he wasn't a burglar. It would have ended the encounter instantly. But Miller saw it differently. In his training, allowing a suspect to go inside a house was a tactical error. They could get a weapon. They could barricade themselves. No, you're not going anywhere near that house, Miller shouted. You're trying to flee. I am trying to prove I live here. Marcus's voice rose for the first time, cracking with frustration. Use your common sense, officer. I have the key in my pocket. Don't reach for your pockets. Miller grabbed Marcus's left wrist. The contact was shocking. Marcus stiffened. He had spent his life debating the use of force, analyzing the continuum of violence. Now the hands of the state were on his skin. Do not pull away, Miller hissed. Stop resisting. I am not resisting, Marcus said, clearly speaking to Mrs. Gable's camera now. I am allowing the officer to hold my wrist. I am making no aggressive movements. Officer, you are assaulting me. I'm detaining you for disorderly conduct and obstruction, Miller said, twisting Marcus's arm behind his back with unnecessary force. A sharp pain shot up Marcus's shoulder. He was 62. His joints weren't what they used to be. He gritted his teeth but didn't fight back. He knew that any physical resistance, even a reflex to pull away from pain, would be used to justify a beating. You are making a catastrophic error, Marcus whispered, his face pressed against the warm metal of the patrol car's hood. You have no idea who I am. I don't care who you are, Miller grunted, pulling the handcuffs from his belt. You're just another guy who thought he could talk his way out of a ride. The cold steel of the cuffs clicked around Marcus's right wrist, then the left. The sound was final. Click, click. Marcus Thorne, the man who wrote the city's policy on de-escalation, the man who had lunch with the mayor once a month, stood handcuffed in his own driveway, smelling the exhaust of the police cruiser and the faint scent of fresh-cut grass. Officer, Marcus said, his voice eerily calm. Check the tightness. You are required to double lock them. General Order 402.1. Miller paused. He couldn't believe this guy. Even in cuffs, he was quoting the manual. Get in the car, Miller said, shoving Marcus toward the rear door. The back of a police interceptor is designed to be dehumanizing. The hard plastic seat forces your body into an awkward angle. The space is cramped. The smell is a mixture of industrial cleaner old sweat and despair. Marcus sat there, his hands numb behind his back, watching his neighborhood roll away through the plexiglass divider. He saw Mrs. Gable on her porch, still filming, looking horrified. He saw his own house, his sanctuary, getting smaller in the distance. He thought about Eleanor inside cooking eggs, wondering why he hadn't come back in for coffee. He hoped she wouldn't come out until he was gone. He didn't want her to see this. Officer Miller drove in silence. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a sullen anger. He felt disrespected. He felt that he had done his job, taken a bad guy off the street, but the nagging voice in the back of his head, the one that whispered, "He has a key, he lives there," was starting to get louder. Marcus closed his eyes and began to work. He wasn't sulking. He was drafting. In his mind, he was already writing the opening paragraph of the formal complaint. Date, October 14th. Time, 10:42 a.m. Location, 412 Sycamore Lane. Officer, Kyle Miller. Badge number 4922. Violation, Fourth Amendment. Unlawful seizure. False arrest. Excessive use of force. Failure to de-escalate violation of Department General Order 201 regarding professional conduct. He cataloged everything. The lack of articulable suspicion, the refusal to verify residency, the escalation, the language used. He memorized the turns the car was taking. They were heading to the North Precinct. Good. The North Precinct was commanded by Captain Reynolds. Marcus knew Reynolds. They had disagreed on policy changes last year, but Reynolds was a pragmatist. He was a good cop who hated bad press. "You comfortable back there?" Miller asked, looking in the rearview mirror, a smug tone in his voice. Marcus opened his eyes. He met the officer's gaze in the mirror. He didn't blink. He didn't look away. "Officer Miller," Marcus said softly, "I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember that you had a chance to walk away. You had a chance to check my ID. You had a chance to listen to the witness. You chose this path." Yeah. Save it for the judge," Miller scoffed. "Oh, I intend to," Marcus replied. "But not the judge you're thinking of." The cruiser turned into the precinct sallyport. The heavy metal gate rattled shut behind them, sealing them in the concrete belly of the station. Miller parked the car and got out. He opened the back door and grabbed Marcus by the arm, hauling him out. "Let's go. Booking." They walked through the heavy steel doors into the processing area. It was busy. Phones were ringing. Officers were typing reports. The air buzzed with the chaotic energy of a police station. Miller marched Marcus toward the main desk, feeling like he had brought in a trophy. He had no idea he had just walked a lion into the den. The booking desk was manned by Sergeant Frank Kowalski. Frank was a fixture of the department, a 58-year-old veteran with white hair, a thick mustache, and a cynical view of the world. He had seen everything. He had processed murderers, drunk drivers, senators' sons, and homeless veterans. He knew the face of every player in the city's legal system. Frank was typing a report, pecking at the keyboard with 2 fingers when he heard the door open. He didn't look up immediately. "Got a refusal to identify," Miller announced, proudly guiding Marcus to the metal bench in front of the desk. "Resisting obstruction. Picked him up on Sycamore. Suspected burglary." Frank sighed. "Paperwork's on the counter, Miller. Empty his pockets." Miller reached into Marcus's back pocket and pulled out his wallet. He tossed it onto the counter. "Check him in. I'm going to go start the report." Frank picked up the wallet. He opened it to get the driver's license. He looked at the ID. Marcus Thorne. Frank froze. His eyes narrowed. He looked at the photo on the license. Then he looked up at the man sitting on the bench. Marcus looked back at him. "Hello, Frank." Frank Kowalski turned a shade of pale that was almost translucent. He dropped the wallet on the desk as if it were burning hot. He stood up so fast his chair rolled back and hit the file cabinets with a loud crash. The entire room went silent. "Director Thorne," Frank choked out. Officer Miller stopped halfway to the break room. He turned around, confused. "Director." Frank came around the desk. He didn't walk. He scrambled. He rushed over to Marcus, his hands shaking slightly. "Get these cuffs off him," Frank barked, his voice cracking. "Sarge?" Miller asked, walking back slowly. "What's going on?" "That's the suspect." "Suspect!" Frank roared, turning on Miller with a fury that startled the other officers in the room. "You idiot! Do you know who this is? This is Marcus Thorne, the executive director of the OPA. He runs the Police Oversight Commission." Miller's face went blank. The words didn't compute. "The Oversight. He's the guy who fires people." "Miller," Frank yelled. "He's the boss of the boss. Unlock him now." Miller stood paralyzed. His brain was trying to rewire itself, trying to reconcile the suspect in the driveway with the man Frank was treating like royalty. "I said, unlock him." Frank grabbed the key from Miller's belt and did it himself. The cuffs clicked open. Marcus rubbed his wrists. He stood up slowly, stretching his shoulders. He adjusted his polo shirt. He looked at Miller, whose arrogance had evaporated, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated horror. "Thank you, Sergeant Kowalski," Marcus said, his voice level. "I would like to see Captain Reynolds immediately, and I would like a bottle of water." "Yes, sir. Right away, sir." Frank pointed a finger at Miller. "You, stay there. Don't move. Don't speak. Don't breathe." Frank picked up the phone. His hands were trembling as he dialed the captain's direct line. "Captain." "Yeah, it's Frank. You need to come down here now." "No, sir. Officer Miller just arrested Marcus Thorne." There was a silence on the other end of the line, followed by a curse word loud enough to be heard through the receiver. 10 minutes later, the atmosphere in Captain Reynolds' office was funereal. The blinds were drawn. The air conditioning hummed aggressively. Marcus sat in a leather chair holding a bottle of Aquafina. Captain Reynolds sat behind his desk looking like he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Officer Miller stood at attention in the center of the room, sweating through his uniform. "Walk me through it." Reynolds said, his voice tight. Miller tried to speak, but his throat was dry. "Sir, I received a call about a burglary suspect. Sycamore Lane. I saw the subject, Mr. Thorne, in the driveway." He matched the description. "Matched the description," Reynolds repeated. He tapped his computer mouse. "I have the dispatch log right here. Suspect description, white male, approx 20-30 years old, wearing a gray hoodie and jeans, carrying a crowbar." Reynolds looked up. He looked at Marcus. Black male, 62 years old, navy polo, khaki shorts, no crowbar. "Explain to me, Officer Miller," Reynolds said, his voice dangerously low. "How does Mr. Thorne match that description?" I didn't see the full description on the MDT, sir. I just saw suspicious person and went to the area. He looked out of place." "Out of place?" Marcus spoke for the first time. "I was in my own driveway. I offered to unlock my front door to prove residency. You told me that was a threat. Miller looked at the floor. I followed training, sir. Securing the scene. No! Reynolds slammed his hand on the desk. You didn't follow training. You followed bias. You saw a black man in a nice neighborhood and you decided he was a criminal. You ignored a lawful offer to prove residency. You escalated a nonviolent situation. And you arrested the head of the Civilian Oversight Board for taking out his recycling. Reynolds turned the monitor so Miller could see. It was the Bodycam footage. They watched in silence as Miller screamed as Marcus calmly cited the law as the cuffs went on. Look at his demeanor. Reynolds pointed at the screen. He's de-escalating you. He's citing Terry. He's citing general orders. Did it never occur to you that this man knew the law better than you? I thought he was just, I don't know, being a smartass, Miller whispered. He was trying to save you from yourself, Reynolds said. And you wouldn't listen. Reynolds stood up. He walked around the desk. He stopped in front of Officer Miller. Officer Miller, I am relieving you of duty effective immediately. Gun and badge, on the desk. Miller's hands shook as he unclipped his holster. He placed his Glock 17 on the mahogany desk. Then he unpinned his badge. The metal clinked against the wood. It sounded like a gavel coming down. You are on administrative leave pending a full investigation, Reynolds said. Get out of my station. Miller turned and walked out. He looked smaller, deflated. His career was effectively over. He knew it. Reynolds knew it. Marcus knew it. Reynolds turned to Marcus. Director Thorne, I don't know what to say. I apologize on behalf of the precinct. This is unacceptable. Marcus stood up. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked tired. It's not enough to say it's unacceptable, Captain. We have to fix it. If he did this to me, imagine what he's been doing to people who can't fire him. Imagine what he did to the kid who didn't know Terry v. Ohio. That's what keeps me up at night. The fallout was swift and public. The video from Mrs. Gable's porch went viral before Marcus even got home. The image of the distinguished Director Thorne being handcuffed next to his recycling bin was splashed across every news channel in the state. Officer Kyle Miller was terminated 3 months later. The investigation revealed a pattern of similar stops, ignoring descriptions, profiling based on race, and escalating when challenged. His union tried to fight it, but the body cam footage was damning. The totality of circumstances defense crumbled when the circumstances were just a man doing chores. The city settled with Marcus Thorne for $450,000. It was a quick settlement. They didn't want to go to court. Marcus took the check, but he didn't keep a dime. He donated the entire amount to the public defender's office to create a legal defense fund for wrongful arrest victims who couldn't afford lawyers. But Marcus didn't stop there. He used the incident to force a rewrite of the department's duty to intervene policy. He made it mandatory for officers to step in when they saw a partner violating rights. He implemented new training simulations that specifically tested officers on checking their bias in affluent neighborhoods. 6 months later, Marcus was back in his driveway. It was Saturday. The sun was shining. He was taking out the recycling. A patrol car drove slowly down Sycamore Lane. The officer inside, a young woman this time, slowed down. She looked at Marcus. She waved. Marcus waved back. He watched the car drive away, the silence of the morning returning. It was a victory, yes. Justice had been served in his case. But as he walked back toward his garage, Marcus couldn't shake the heavy feeling in his chest. He knew that he had survived because of who he was. He had the title. He had the knowledge. He had the power. But what about the man who doesn't? What about the man who works 2 jobs, who doesn't know the case law, who panics when a gun is pointed at him? That man ends up in a cell, or worse, in a grave. This story isn't just about one bad cop or one lucky director. It's about a system that requires a citizen to be a legal expert just to survive a Saturday morning. It's about the fact that innocent until proven guilty, sometimes feels like a luxury reserved for the privileged. We have to ask ourselves, why is calm compliance not enough? Why must we be perfect to be treated with basic human dignity? Marcus Thorne won his battle, but the war for true equal justice, that is still being fought, driveway by driveway, street by street. Thank you for watching this story. If it made you think, if it made you feel something, please share it. We need these stories to be told. What would you have done in Marcus's shoes? Would you have been able to stay that calm? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that reveal the truth about our justice system. Until next time, stay safe and know your rights.